Welcome to A Documentary Life with Charlie Spickler, powered by Dunkin, deadlines, dry wit, and EV charging stations that occasionally borrow. Welcome to our listeners on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. For those of you on YouTube, you can see my smiling face. And for those of you on Spotify and Apple Podcast, you get to hear my melodic tones. So question, do you need a $20,000 camera package to make a documentary film? No. Do you need reliable tools that disappear into your workflow? Absolutely. Welcome to episode number 4. In this episode, we're going to break down the reality of documentary gear, from cameras and lenses, to bags, batteries, and audio, and surviving airport security with your sanity intact. And yes, that can be done too. So let's get into it. If you've been following me on my YouTube channel in Frame Brooklyn, I've talked a whole lot about gear. What you need, what you don't need, and some of the myths and YouTube trends which absolutely drive me crazy. Back in December, I opened an account on Reddit. I mainly post and answer questions in the documentary filmmakers, subreddit. As I tell you, I actually genuinely enjoy answering questions and giving advice to new documentary filmmakers. It's really cool. However, what I am tired of is answering the same 3 questions over and over again, and having to scream above the bad advice from armchair documentary filmmakers and, pardon my ire, film school teachers who have not made a film in the real world in 20 years, or ever. I'm not generalizing. I think there are actually a number of great doc filmmaking teachers out there, but most of that isn't happening at the university level. This problem, that's a whole other podcast, I may or may not get into at some later date. But let's break down the 3 myths when it comes to gear and intent. Bear with me. For those of you on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you're going to have to imagine that there's some visuals on the screen. Not a lot, but just a little. So, the first myth. Better gear will make you a better filmmaker. Wrong, thanks for playing. The second myth. If I don't have the highest quality camera that shoots 18K with the best lens or drone or whatever the newest gimbal is or gadget every person on YouTube is reviewing, then my film will suck and not be broadcastable. I think that's a word. Wrong, thanks for playing again. And the third myth, and this is the one that makes me most crazy, if you don't have the right gear, if I don't have the right gear, my film won't get into a festival. Oh my God, please just stop. So let's start with number 1. Better gear will make you a better filmmaker. This reminds me of the movie Ronin with Robert De Niro. It's a really wonderful cast, and it flew under the radar because it was kind of like a spy movie dressed up as an action film. But De Niro, Sean Bean, Jean Reno, Natasha McElhone, Skip Sedith, Stellan Skarsgård, and the wonderful Jonathan Pryce. It's really an amazing film. You should watch it. But there's one moment towards the beginning of the film where Sean Bean asked De Niro what kind of gun he uses. This is something a non-pro would never ask. And we find out not so long afterwards, spoiler alert, that Sean Bean's character was not quite up to snuff. We'll leave it at that. De Niro's answer, however, was, it's a tool. Just like any other tool in the toolbox, you use the right tool for the right job. Now, that was a long-winded way of saying there is no perfect camera for doc filmmaking. And an Arri, or a Burano, or even the C400 is not going to make you a better filmmaker. I will tell you what will make you a better filmmaker. Try making films. Doc filmmaking is as much about putting in the reps as anything else. No one expects your first doc to be a masterpiece, and neither should you. What you should be focusing in is on making a film with whatever gear you have. A doc feature shot on an iPhone Pro Max is going to be 1,000 times better than no film at all. Think about that. What makes me absolutely nuts, and my followers on YouTube already know this, waiting for the best gear or the right gear to start shooting, I think is a cop-out. For I'm scared or I'm waiting for permission to shoot. You pick up whatever camera you have, and you start filming. When I made Rescue Brooklyn, I never clue what I was doing. I'd been in narrative film for 10 years, but I knew I wanted to make a documentary about Sean Casey Allen Rescue. So I just showed up the next day after we adopted our dog with a camera and a microphone. By the way, it was the wrong camera. I was shooting to tape. I had to get a camera that shot to cards. That's a whole other story. And I started shooting. Did I make some mistakes? Oh, yes. And not just some, but a lot. But I learned more about documentary filmmaking in the 2 years I followed Sean than I could have in any classroom. And that was 2012, pre-YouTube University and pre-the echo chamber. Doc filmmaking is about the reps, not about the camera. So the moral of the story is shoot with whatever you can, and keep shooting. That's the way you get better. Okay, myth number 2. If you don't have a high-quality camera, your film won't be screenable. or broadcastable or whatever. This could not be more wrong. I, like many of you, spend a lot of time watching documentary-centric YouTube channels, probably more than I should. And I am friendly with more than a few of these creators. And I understand, by the way, that for many of these folks, reviewing the newest and latest camera and lens and GoPro and drone and gimbal and LUT and software innovation is how they support themselves. And I begrudge no one for making a living doing what they love. That is truly a gift. However, it is important to recognize that new is not always better, and that new is not required for distribution or streaming. As many of you know, and if you don't, you're about to, my camera of choice, the camera that I have shot and am shooting docs for PBS broadcasts, is my cherished Canon C300 Mark II. It's an 11-year-old broadcast camera, and when it was released in 2015, it was $16,000. My first one, the one that got stolen, was $1,800. My current camera, which I'm shooting everything on, was $2,400. Both bought on eBay. It's a great doc camera and considered by almost every working documentary filmmaker the top two professional cameras flip-flopping with the FX9. And that's because it's no secret that there is not a broadcaster or streamer right now who broadcasts in anything over 4K, which is what the C300 shoots in. But more importantly, if you look up the deliverables for all your online streamers, almost all of them require some sort of 1080 HD. PBS specifically requires me to downsize my 4K to 1080 HDV, HDVCAM, HD 422. That's it. Not 6K or 8K or 400K. Nothing, I mean nothing, broadcasts in that, and virtually no one has a device to watch it. So what does that mean? It means you can shoot your movie on an iPhone if you need, but the other half of that equation is sound. Good sound and mediocre picture will get you far. Amazing picture and crappy sound, you might as well trash it. No one wants to listen to bad sound. So when you're spending money on gear to make your first documentary film, you're not worrying about the next film or what will be the state of the industry 5 years from now. Worry about what you're making now. Get the best gear you can afford, a decent camera, and a better mic, and go out and make your film. Nobody watching your film is going to be sitting there watching and go, "Ooh, I wonder what camera he's using, or what exposure he's using, or is it open gate, or is it float this?" That's not what they want. They will engage if the story is compelling, the interviews are honest. If they're learning something, you don't need a Burano for that. You need a vision, you need your curiosity, and you need the desire for telling stories. And now we get to myth number 3, the one that drives me nuts. I posted about this on Reddit a few months ago. If I hear one more first-time filmmaker, or even second-time filmmaker ask, "Will my film be good enough for a festival?" Or, "How can I make this so it will get into festivals?" Or, "Which festival should I be applying to before they've even shot a single frame?" It makes me want to pull out what's left of the hair in my head. Just stop, okay? Somewhere, someone sold the myth that film festivals were the ultimate goal for independent film. Granted, back when I started in 1997, they were, because there was no other path to distribution back then, and doing well at a festival would often lead to some kind of distribution deal, big or small. And, however, the competition was much less, and still, the acceptance to submission ratio was insane. When we submitted our feature to Sundance in 2003, I think there were about 5,000 submissions. In 2025, there were 15,075 submissions. Add to that, those distribution avenues don't even exist anymore. I think a couple of years ago, one of the winners at Sundance got a distribution deal. So no matter how good you think your film is, and the odds of your first film is not going to make your career. Forget about film festivals and make the damn film you want to make. Keep in mind also that doc filmmaking is even dicier, as there are much fewer pure documentary festivals, and even when they do shove a doc category into a film festival, it's usually pretty lame. If you're making doc films in order to get into a festival, then I think you need to rethink your life choices. As I said in episode 3, there is no money in documentary filmmaking. We do it because we need to do it. So make your film and worry about who's going to see it when you're done, okay? That's all the oxygen I'm going to waste on this film festival thing. So, what gear do you need? Now's the fun part. When we will actually talk about gear you do need and you don't need. And I'm going to be coming at this as a one-man band who does everything himself. In my book, Documentary Filmmaking 101, I propose that you can make a full-length documentary film for under $5,000. That includes gear purchase, production, food, travel, editing software. So let's start with the camera. When you're choosing a camera for doc filmmaking, it's important to have a camera that you really want to shoot with, then how amazing and new it is. Doc filmmaking can be grueling, okay? It's a grueling process. If you're schlepping around a camera that's too heavy or too complicated to set up, you're not going to be in a great mood when you finally get to the interview. My C300 is set up so that once it's up on sticks or the sack, I turn it on, I start shooting. I don't have to worry about the camera. I'm not even thinking about the camera. I'm concentrating on the interview. You want a camera that will disappear. The camera is just a tool to record the story or the event or the conference or the rally where you're at. If you're worried about your camera working or is it set up the way you need it, then you're not present for your interview subject. And by the way, they will notice. So get a camera you're comfortable with shooting, okay? That's step one. My advice to all young and first-time doc filmmakers is just get one lens, okay? You don't need to be worrying about lens choices on your first doc. And my advice is always 10 out of 10, a 24 to 105 zoom. Canon makes a 4.3 or 4.5, it's about $300, but 24 to 105 is the perfect doc lens. You can go wide for sit-down interviews, you can zoom, run and gun for verite shooting. It frees you up from having to make lens choices. If you want a second lens, a 35mm prime is always good for a sit-down. That would be a good choice, but definitely not required. Also, I don't want to get too much into rig building, but setting your camera up with a V-mount system will take away your worries of running out of juice during an interview. 2 V-mount batteries take the place of like 6 of those little standard batteries, and they go from between 4 to 6 hours, depending on which ones you use. That's just good advice. You don't want to run out of juice. Also note, you can bring the V-mount batteries on the plane, when you travel, but they have to go on the plane with you according to TSA. You cannot put them under the plane, please. Remember that. That's really, really important. Next and most important is your microphone. As a one-man band, you'll be mounting this on your camera, so that you want to look for the best shotgun mic you can find. Sennheiser and Rode, both making really great mics now. Do not cut corners here. This is where you spend your money. Last but not least, a decent light travel tripod. Manfrotto, Small Rig, Sackler, all make decent tripods. Get something sturdy that will last. Too many people skimp here and buy a crappy tripod that doesn't work, it breaks, and then they get another crappy tripod. And I would also be remiss I didn't mention sack. You need a good camera bag to work out of, and you can do no better than a sack pack cube for run and gun verite, documentary filmmaking. Also for run and gun, the sack's in a saddle, lifesaver for me on Outcast Nation, and more recently on After Never Again. You don't need a Steadicam rig or an easy rig. The sack is the answer to handheld run and gun shooting. So please spend wisely. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that's all you need to get started. But we should talk a little bit about lighting. If you haven't taken a lighting class or studied lighting, your first documentary film is not where you should be experimenting lighting. Find the best base to set up your interview and go with natural light. The new, hybrid cameras and video cameras shoot in all kinds of light. So don't worry about lighting. I was a lighting designer for 15 years, and while I believe film lighting is important, it's certainly not as important as getting, the story what you've got in whatever available light there is. Okay? So what's the takeaway from this episode? Well, I hope I've helped some beginning doc filmmakers to see how easy it is to get started. The gatekeeping that used to exist when I started is gone. There are so many more ways to get your stuff out there without the expense and futility of film festivals, where your film is competing against 20,000 other films. We will talk about distribution options, traditional and non-traditional later down the road. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I'm always open to answering questions from doc filmmakers, and you can reach out to me through my website, www.realbrooklynfilms.net, or my email, charlierbfnyc@gmail.com. And as always, until next time, keep filming. Welcome to A Documentary Life was produced by Charlie Spickler, written and directed by Charlie Spickler, all rights reserved, Real Brooklyn Films 2026. For more information about the podcast, go to www.realbrooklynfilms.net.